What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Aqua Supreme back with another video, and today's video is going to be aquarium plants. So, aquarium plants, those leafy greens that we all have in our tank and aspire for them to grow and be beautiful, lush, gorgeous. You know, you want your tanks green, beautiful and red. You do get a few red plants, but mostly it's green. So I'm going to help you guys to get the most growth and the most color out of your aquarium plants. So the first tip that I'm going to give you guys is going to be lighting. So lighting is one of the most important things when it comes to grow plants. They do need lighting to photosynthesize. It's the same that they do in the wild with sunlight, and sunlight does give a lot of rays, a lot of different heat waves, a lot of different UV beams, all those type of things. So you are going to want a strong light. You want a light with different spectrums. So that is most likely going to be your whites, your blues, your greens, not your blues, red spectrums, your white spectrums and your green spectrums. They do provide the most to your tropical aquarium plants. And then you want a light with a high wattage range. So what I do is I usually take the amount of watts and compare that to the size of the tank. It doesn't really work like that, but that's what I do. It does help me when figuring out what sort of light I need for my aquarium plants, and they are growing beautifully. I'll put a video up on how they are looking now compared to how they looked like about 3 months ago. Yeah, so it did take quite a while, but they do look very beautiful now. To the wattage range, I almost forgot about that. I take about 1 watt per 3 liter, or that's going to be 1 watt per 1 gallon, more or less. So if you have a 20-gallon tank, you're going to want to have 20 watts of output from your aquarium light. If you have, for say, a 2-foot tank which has around 60 liters, you are going to want a 20 watt light. So that is how I do the math, I would say. There isn't really an equation, but that is what I do just to make sure that my plants do have enough lighting to grow. And it also depends on the amount of plants that you have in your tank, but more or less it's going to be that range that I gave you guys now. So going into photosynthesis, that is what your light provides to the plants. It provides time for them, or while they use the light to photosynthesize, and that helps them to grow, and it does bring out that green in the plants. So plants require about 14 hours, I think it's 12 to 14 hours of good lighting for them to properly photosynthesize. So it is important to keep your lights on for about 12 to 14 hours. I do 10 hours and that works perfectly. I can do 12, but algae is a problem, so I do 10 hours of lighting and that works perfectly. They do need that time to rest. And then what happens after your plants stop photosynthesizing? Well, I'm gonna help you with that. So when your plants stop photosynthesizing, algae has a lot of nutrition that the plants aren't using that they use to grow. So they consume that nutrition and then algae grows. Then tip number 2 is going to be nutrients. Plants need nutrients to help grow. They consume those nutrients that are in your fish tank, and that helps them to grow. The same as the good lighting that is inside of your tank. So you are going to need a type of soil inside of your aquarium. It doesn't matter on the brand or whatever, any soil will do, but your plants are going to need some type of soil. And if you go back a few videos on my channel where I'm setting up my tanks, I'll show you how I incorporate the soil into my tanks to help the plants grow. That is a good method, and MD Fish Tanks also uses that method. Otherwise you can just cover the entire tank with soil. That will also do, and that is going to help a lot more, but this is just an easier and cheaper way for you to use that soil to the best of its usage. Anyway, going on from that, the next sort of nutritional value that the plants get is through fish waste. So when fishes produce waste the same as animals produces waste, that helps them to grow. So having some fish in your tank will definitely increase the nutrient level, not too much fish, because then you're going to have an ammonia spike and all that blah blah blah. So just the right amount of fish, and that will help increase the nutrient level inside of your tank. And then going on from there, something else that you can go if you want to do deeper, if you have the money that you want to spend for your plants to grow more beautiful, is going to be things such as your liquid fertilizers, so your Seachem XLs and your Seachem Flourish and phosphates and all those things. And I think API has that CO2 booster. CO2 booster does help a lot. I haven't used it myself personally, but I've heard that the CO2 booster does help. So you can add in those liquid fertilizers. Well, the CO2 booster isn't really a fertilizer. It's sort of. It's a liquid. I'm talking about liquids now. So that you can add in, or you can add in some things such as your root tabs. You can just stick that into your gravel and that will help with the nutrients. It does release nutrients. Or you get those CO2 tablets that you also can add into your tank. So it's 2 days CO2 and then 5 days carbon source. So that does help a lot when it comes to your plants. Sorry, I'm speaking so much, but yes, that is your fertilizers or your nutrient range going from there. So the next advice that I can give you guys is getting good tank mates for your plants. So many fish do go well with plants, but you do get your few fish that plants absolutely hate and that fish hate. The fish hate the plants and the plants hate the fish. That is what I'm trying to say. So that is going to be things such as your cichlids or your goldfish. They usually like ripping up plants. Even your discus, they do that sometimes. They like ripping up plants from the soil. So that is what they do. I haven't heard this before, but I think it is a possibility for fish such as your loaches that go sifting around the gravel. I think they can also easily rip up the stems or the roots of the plants out of the gravel if your gravel level isn't thick enough. So that is also a possibility and something to watch out. Make sure your fish can go with your plants, but most fish do go well with your plants. My next tip is going to be having a good ratio of fish to plants. What I mean with that is having enough fish for your plants and having enough plants for your fish waste. So fish produces waste, as I mentioned earlier, that the plants help to grow. But if you have too many fish inside of your tank, the nutrients are going to be too much. The plants aren't going to use all of the nutrients, and that is going to lead to an ammonia buildup. And that is not what you want inside of your tank. And then from that, having too many plants in your tank and too little fish, the plants aren't going to have any nutrients. If you do not have soil or fertilizers inside of your tank, the plants aren't going to have enough nutrients to grow beautifully. So that is important, but usually it does balance itself out. If you have too many nutrients, the plants tend to grow a bit quicker, but I wouldn't take that risk. The risk of an ammonia spike is much higher than your plant growth. And if you have too many plants and too little fish, some plants do die. So if you see your plants turning brown or dying, that is going to be due to the nutrients that they do not have inside of your tank. The next tip that I'm going to give you guys is you have too many floating plants inside of your tank, or do not have that many floating plants inside of your tank. What floating plants do is they cover the surface of your aquarium. They come in the form of frog bits, water lettuce, salvinia, and you can also use the plants that you usually stick into the ground, or plant into the ground as floating plants, such as your water sprites and all those weird guppy grass, those weird things. You can use that as a floating plant, but what that does is it does cover up the surface from light penetrating down to the bottom where your other plants are, so those plants aren't getting any light, only the top part, the floating plants have light, and that is going to cause your plants underneath, your planted plants, to die, unfortunately. Something else that floating plants do is they also take up nutrients out of the water column. So they reduce the water nutrients, or well, they reduce the nutrients and the nitrites which are inside of your tank. They use that as food. So they also they compete, I would say, with planted plants inside of your tank for nutrients. So that is important to know. Only have a few, not too many, and if they get a lot, remove some. Then my last tip that I'm going to give you guys, I did keep this for last because it is not a method that everyone wants to use and everyone shouldn't, and it is very expensive. That's why I kept it for last, and that is going to be CO2, so your carbon dioxide. That helps a lot with plants growing, especially your harder plants such as your, what's those ground cover plants. Those ones, they require, it's recommended to have CO2 with those plants. The CO2 does help them to spread instead of just growing up. So that's what I've heard with CO2, regarding CO2 and ground cover plants. And then CO2 does help because plants, when we breathe out, we obviously breathe out CO2, and then plants use that to grow and to release oxygen. So having CO2 in your tank is beneficial. The plants do use that, and many aquascapers do use CO2 inside of their tanks. So if you are a bit curious about that, do go look up CO2 systems inside of an aquarium, and then you are going to see a lot of aquascapers and a lot of beautiful plant tanks using CO2. But it isn't a necessity. You do not have to have them, they are expensive. Another important thing to note when having or running CO2 inside of your tank is that the plants use CO2 when they are busy photosynthesizing. So as the lights are on, they use that CO2 to release oxygen inside of the water. But once those lights go off, your tank lights go off, they're not using that CO2 anymore, that carbon dioxide, to grow. And that is basically pure carbon dioxide releasing into your tank. And fish do not breathe carbon dioxide, they will suffocate from that, the same as us humans will suffocate from carbon dioxide. You remember when we had to wear masks and you felt like dying every single time you had to put them on? That is what happens when you inhale carbon dioxide. When turning off your lights at night, just turn off your CO2 system, or if you do not want to turn off your CO2 system, you can add an extra air stand. Will do the trick, but I wouldn't take that risk when doing this. Rather just switch off your CO2 compartment system, and that's going to be your best bet when it comes to CO2. Hey guys, that was it for the video. Hopefully you've learned something from this video. Hopefully your plants will grow immensely. Hopefully your plants will grow immensely. Hopefully they will grow beautiful. Hopefully those greens and those reds which you were looking for are going to start popping. If you did find this video informative, please guys remember to subscribe, remember to leave a like and leave a comment, as it does help out a lot for the YouTube algorithm. And remember to watch the video to the end, which is now. So thank you so much guys. Peace.